They say Metallica forged the blueprint for thrash metal, but the betrayal that tore apart their original lineup nearly destroyed both James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine before they became legends. For 40 years, fans thought they knew the story. Creative differences led to Mustaine's departure in 1983. But in this recent interview, Hetfield finally revealed the shocking truth behind one of metal's most bitter feuds. And it wasn't about music at all. James Allen Hetfield and David Scott Mustaine weren't just bandmates in early Metallica. They were musical brothers who shared an obsession with speed, aggression, and pushing metal to its absolute limits. When they first met in the early 1980s Los Angeles metal scene, both were hungry young musicians desperate to escape their troubled backgrounds through the raw power of heavy music. Hetfield, born in Downey, California in 1963, had grown up in a strict Christian Science household where his mother's faith prevented her from seeking medical treatment for her cancer, ultimately leading to her death when James was just 16. Music became his refuge from grief and anger, and his powerful rhythm guitar style and commanding vocals would eventually define Metallica's sound. Mustaine, born in La Mesa, California in 1961, brought a different but equally intense energy to the partnership. His childhood was marked by his father's abandonment and his family's frequent moves, creating a restless, sometimes volatile personality that manifested in his blistering lead guitar work and aggressive stage presence. When he joined Metallica in 1981, he brought not only his technical skills but also several songs that would become metal classics. Together, Hetfield and Mustaine created a musical chemistry that was undeniable. They spent countless hours in cramped rehearsal spaces, pushing each other to play faster, harder, and more aggressively than anyone else in the scene. Their shared vision of what metal could become went beyond just making music. They were creating a movement that would influence generations of musicians. The early days of Metallica were marked by an almost brotherly bond between the two guitarists. They lived together, partied together, and dreamed together about conquering the metal world. This closeness made what would eventually happen between them all the more devastating. By 1982, Metallica was gaining momentum, but intense personalities that fueled their partnership were also creating serious friction. Mustaine's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, fueled by heavy drinking, and what bandmates described as unpredictable mood swings that could turn violent without warning. The first major incident occurred during a tour in early 1982 when Mustaine allegedly damaged hotel property during a drunken rage. According to band accounts, he smashed furniture and threw a television out of a hotel window, forcing the band to pay substantial damages and creating tension with venue owners. The relationship reached its breaking point during a tour in early 1983, but the final straw wasn't what fans expected. While the official story focused on Mustaine's unreliability, Hetfield revealed in 2023 that the real catalyst was a personal betrayal that cut much deeper than professional disagreements. According to Hetfield's recent revelations, Mustaine had crossed a line involving personal relationships and trust that had been building for over 2 years. The confrontation that ended Mustaine's time in Metallica reportedly took place in a hotel room before a scheduled performance. Witnesses described shouting through the walls, followed by something heavy being thrown. When other band members investigated, they found Mustaine's guitar smashed and Hetfield refusing to speak about what had happened. There were nights when we'd finish a show and Dave would just explode over something completely random, drummer Lars Ulrich later recalled. Dave Mustaine's response to his ejection from Metallica was swift and devastating. Within months of being kicked out, he had formed Megadeth with the explicit goal of proving that he was the superior musician and that Metallica had made a terrible mistake. This wasn't just about starting a new band. It was about declaring war on his former bandmates through music. Megadeth's early material was filled with thinly veiled attacks on Metallica, with songs like Mechanix serving as Mustaine's version of what would become Metallica's The Four Horsemen. The message was clear. Anything Metallica could do, Mustaine could do better, faster, and more technically proficient. The competition between the two bands became one of the defining rivalries of the 1980s metal. Both groups were signed to major labels and began releasing albums that pushed the boundaries of speed and aggression, with each trying to outdo the other in terms of technical complexity and commercial success. Hetfield, meanwhile, was dealing with the pressure of proving that Metallica had made the right choice. The band's partnership with Kirk Hammett, who replaced Mustaine as lead guitarist, created a different but ultimately more stable dynamic. However, Hetfield carried the weight of the unresolved conflict with Mustaine, knowing that their former bandmate was using his pain as fuel for increasingly successful music. The media attention surrounding the rivalry only intensified the personal animosity. Music journalists constantly asked both bands about the split, forcing them to relive the conflict in interviews and keeping the wounds fresh. Both Hetfield and Mustaine became skilled at diplomatic responses, but the underlying hurt and anger were obvious to anyone who watched them closely. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the feud played out on the world's biggest stages, with both Metallica and Megadeth achieving massive success while their leaders remained locked in a silent combat. Industry insiders reported that management teams actively worked to avoid scheduling conflicts and kept the musicians separated at major events. The competition reached its peak in the early 1990s when both bands were at their commercial height. Metallica's Black Album in 1991 brought mainstream success that Megadeth couldn't match, but Mustaine's band maintained critical credibility that some felt Metallica had sacrificed. Behind the scenes, both musicians struggled with the personal toll of their unresolved conflict. Hetfield's battles with alcoholism were well documented, and those close to him suggested that guilt over the Mustaine situation was one factor that fueled his drinking. Mustaine dealt with his own substance abuse problems and later converted to Christianity. In 2023, exactly 40 years after Dave Mustaine's departure from Metallica, James Hetfield finally revealed the complete truth about their feud in a comprehensive interview that stunned the metal community. His admission that the conflict wasn't primarily about music, but about personal betrayal, recontextualized 4 decades of rivalry. The reconciliation didn't happen overnight. It began in the mid-2000s when both men started acknowledging publicly that their feud had gone on too long. The first signs of thaw came when Mustaine was diagnosed with radial neuropathy in 2002. Hetfield reportedly sent a private message of support, marking their first direct communication in nearly 20 years. "We were kids, and we handled it like kids," Hetfield said in a 2023 interview. "Looking back, there were better ways to deal with what was happening, but we didn't have the maturity or tools to handle conflict in a healthy way." The most surprising aspect of Hetfield's revelations was his acknowledgement that he had missed Mustaine's friendship and creative input more than he had ever admitted publicly. This honesty opened the door for complete reconciliation. Today, both musicians are in their 60s, still actively touring, and their reconciliation has become a powerful example of how even the deepest conflicts can eventually be resolved with time, maturity, and honest communication. Thanks for watching. Click here to check another video and make sure to subscribe to our channel.